All right, good afternoon. We are three hardware wallet companies slash wallets, and we're going to be talking about multi-vendor multisig today. We're also going to be kind of broadening it a little bit, more in general, multisig, passphrases, things like that. If you guys want to do a quick introduction, and then we can get started. Do you want to go Seed first?
Sure, I'll start over here. I'm a NIM online, but I go by the name SeedSigner, and I created and lead the SeedSigner project, which is an open source software project that lets people build basically a hardware wallet from off-the-shelf electronic parts, all open source and things that people can build, source your own parts and build it in the privacy of your own home.
Yeah, as you might have guessed, I'm also a NIM online. I go by Bitcoin QnA, and I'm a Bitcoin educator and head of customer experience at Foundation. And we manufacture Bitcoin hardware wallets. You don't have to build them yourself, much like Mr. SeedSigner over there. And yeah, if you want to come and check us out, you'll find us right in the far corner over there.
Awesome. And my name is Hodl Dee. I work for Coinkite. We are a Bitcoin-only hardware wallet company that we have our MK4 and Cold Card Q, as well as other fun products as well. And today we're just going to, again, be talking about multisig in general and why it's important and how it can help you, pros and cons, benefits, things like that. So, Steve, do you want to start off with why multi-vendor, multisig could benefit someone in the crowd or at home?
Right. To take a half a step back, why multisig? And
of course, yeah.
The whole concept is that you have some sort of fault tolerance in your cold storage setup. So with a single sig wallet, if something happens with the wallet or the backup to that wallet, you unfortunately lose your Bitcoin. But the advantage of a multi-sig is that if you lose one of the keys that protects your Bitcoin, there's still a fallback procedure where you don't lose your money. Now, multi-vendor, multi-sig, the advantage of that is you get multiple different hardware profiles and different software sets, so that if there was some sort of inadvertent or malicious aspect of any one of the devices in your quorum, that isn't a deal breaker for your funds. So the advantage is that if somebody's a bad actor or if there's some sort of technical glitch that could affect your Bitcoin, your risk of that issue is spread out across several different software and hardware profiles.
Right. Better than having one of three of the same product. You can spread out that security or that risk to multiple vendors, and it's definitely beneficial to the end user. Did you want to expand a little bit on that, or?
Yeah, I'd like to chime in on maybe one of the downsides to it.
Yes. Yeah.
So obviously, yeah, Seed was absolutely correct in saying that you're kind of spreading that risk out. One of the downsides for me is that multi-sig is obviously more complex than single signature setup because you've got many more moving parts. And by adding in multiple vendors, obviously you now have, let's say in a 2 or 3 where you've got 3 different keys, you now have 3 different sets of learning curves to learn, how to use device A and how to back up device A, and the same for B and C. So you're adding that extra level of complexity on top of what's already, in my opinion, can be too much for most people in terms of, just getting a multi-sig setup in the first place.
Right.
As well as software updates. If you have 3 different devices, you're also responsible for keeping those devices updated if there are patches or additional features you want access to, yeah.
Right. Checking the binaries, checking the firmware, make sure it's all good, nothing's wrong. Yeah, absolutely. I find a lot of people in the early days, or not early days, but early in their Bitcoin journey, they kind of listen to some podcasts and kind of get pushed into multisig very fast. And they may not be prepared for what that entails. And if you're doing a multi-vendor multisig, you're actually, like you said, adding way more complexity onto that, which could potentially be a foot gun in some sort. Let's talk about multisig in general versus single sig. I know you kind of touched on it a little bit here. What are your thoughts on the average user, and what might be best for some people might not be good for others? When would a multi-sig be beneficial, and when would maybe a single sig be more beneficial? Go ahead.
I'll start off. It really depends on your personal situation, your preferences. I think it's important for people as they're considering how they store their Bitcoin to be looking at one thing to keep in mind is perfect security does not exist, and security is a process and not a goal. So you may start with a single sig, you may add a password, and then you may ultimately decide that multi-sig's the way to go, or you may never reach that point. But I think it's important to think about security as a process, and the most important thing Well, there's several important things, but it's important to technically have a good setup, but it's also important to pay attention to what helps you sleep at night. So if you have even sometimes irrational issues that you think about with relation to your cold storage, it's important to pay attention to those issues, and where you can, try to put yourself at ease.
Yeah, I'd say there's no right or wrong answer here. As you said, it's a very personal thing, and it's not a binary choice. You know, just because you make one decision today doesn't mean that that isn't going to change in the future. The kind of general advice that I like to give people is keep your setup as simple as you can for as long as you can. And the main reason that I say that is one of the most often overlooked aspects of multisig, or well, any Bitcoin setup, is inheritance. I always ask people that come to me, they go, okay, well, should I use multisig? Everybody tells me it's the most secure. And I'm like, well, yeah, it is the most secure way to secure your Bitcoin. But you might be a competent Bitcoiner. You might be comfortable with your setup, but if you get hit by a bus tomorrow, is your next of kin going to know what to do with 3 different hardware wallets from 3 different manufacturers? Do they know where the backups live? Do they know how to coordinate, you know, all of those devices into Sparrow or Seed or in Spectre, etc.? Like, single sig for a non-Bitcoiner is difficult enough. When you add in all those extra moving parts, it's, you know, going to become a non-starter for most people if they're not well entrenched and well educated. Yeah,
we like to like at Coinkite we like to say keep it simple, stupid, right? KISS. You know, you can always start with $20 and move it around and learn how Bitcoin operates and how to create PSBTs and, you know, just play and interact with these hardware wallets and learn before, you know, you send some Bitcoin to it and 10 years later you're ready to spend it. Or your family's ready to spend it and they have no idea what to do, right? You can have a small amount, throw it around. You know, you're obviously going to spend most of it to fees, but just learning and interacting with these hardware wallets is definitely beneficial. And that muscle memory comes with time. And it takes you know, take it slow, learn, and over time you'll get it, and it'll become again muscle memory. So.
I think something else to add as well is that all of the devices that we produce all have testnet mode, and all of the good software wallets that all of our devices are compatible with also have testnet mode. So yes, if you want to dip your toes into multisig, you're going to have the device in the first place, but know that you can do that and do all of the testing and, you know, recovering from your backups and creating a multisig setup in the first place in testnet mode with all of these devices, such that, you know, if you make all of the mistakes in the world, then you don't lose any real world value.
Great point. Great point.
I'd also say QnA brings up a great point about inheritance and planning for, you know, what if something happens to you? And one approach that I talk about sometimes is we all have good Bitcoin friends, people we know from a local meetup or people we know from, you know, online and conferences or whatever. And that person's probably not necessarily the person that you're going to leave your Bitcoin to. But one way to think of it is, like in my personal setup, my family knows where the secrets are stored, and they may not be the most technically proficient Bitcoiners, but they have kind of a phone a friend, a person that I trust, who's going to help them put the pieces together if, you know, God forbid something happens to me or whatever. So that's another approach, is just to have a good technical friend that doesn't necessarily have access to your keys, but that you would trust to help, you know, your spouse or your loved ones access your Bitcoin.
Might be a better choice than like a lawyer or something that's, you know, you don't want to expose too much to people that could be potentially compromised. So a friend or family member or someone that is close to you is definitely a better option for sure. Let's talk about configuration files and what you need for a multisig, right? Obviously, people say 2 of 3. All I need is 2 keys, and I can automatically sign whatever I want. But this kind of descriptor file or configuration file that people don't talk about very often, and obviously it's very important. Steve, do you want to kind of maybe touch on that and why it's important?
Yeah, the configuration file can be reconstituted if you have all of the private keys that make up the quorum. However, the whole point of multisig is that if you lose access to a key, you can still recover from that. So it's important to back up what is called commonly a wallet descriptor. Is that a term we agree on? A wallet descriptor that contains, to get a little bit technical, it contains the public versions of all your private keys as well as some broader configuration information about the wallet. And an important thing to think about in terms of the wallet descriptor is that information is private but not secret. So if someone were to get access to the wallet descriptor, they would be able to see the amount of money that is in your wallet. They would be able to track your transactions, but they would not actually be able to access your funds or move any Bitcoin without also having access to your private keys. So the wallet descriptor, I like to say, is very important, but it's also relatively easy to safeguard. Whereas I would never put my private keys, obviously, in a cloud storage environment or a password manager or anything like that. I think it's a reasonable proposition to encrypt your wallet descriptor and keep it, in a cloud storage service or to put it in a password manager. And honestly, with a multisig backup, I recommend to people that you take that descriptor and keep it with a copy of each of your private keys as well. So there's ways you can back it up online as well as offline.
Yeah, you can have multiple backups.
Exactly.
You can have infinite backups, right? You want to obviously keep minimal, but enough to be able to receive it when needed, right? Go ahead, QnA.
Yeah, I think, like you said, it's private but not secret, I think was the way you described it. And the very nature of that means that you can be a little bit more kind of liberal with how and where you store this. Obviously, it's still a sensitive piece of information, but it's, you can be a little bit more liberal with how and where you store that. Something I wanted to add as well, that, the very concept or the term descriptor sounds like fairly complex, but all of the wallets that we are all compatible with make it very easy for you to kind of you can either print that out and laminate it, or you can the most common way is to just kind of save a digital file, and you can then copy that to, like Seed said, to an encrypted cloud storage, maybe like something like Proton Drive, or you can just store it on a local storage medium, maybe an SD card or a USB drive that, as Seed said, that you can keep with each of your all important seed word backups.
Absolutely. Speaking of multisig and the configuration file or descriptor file, a lot of people use collaborative multisig as well to kind of help alleviate maybe an inheritance plan, or even just for themselves. Say they lose a key, there's a service that offers that where they hold the key for you so that you can sign your funds in case you lose one. Do you guys want to maybe talk about maybe the pros and maybe the cons of maybe the privacy trade-off of that? And yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, kick off with the pros. We've talked about the inheritance is kind of like problem number one when it comes to multisig, especially if you're kind of rolling your own setup with all of our devices in something like Sparrow. These collaborative multisig services obviously have that inheritance built in as a service. That's one of the main things that you're paying for. So one of the main pros for me is that, again, going back to the horrible scenario, if you were hit by a bus tomorrow, then it's just a phone call to an established, well-regulated company where there's going to be somebody on the other end of the phone to walk your next of kin through how to recover access to your Bitcoin. And they may not even need to move it. It would just be that they are the custodian of the new account, rather than having to go through the rigmarole of kind of changing any key sets or anything like that. The main con for me as a privacy advocate would be that you're sharing that we've just been talking about descriptors and all those public keys. So let's say that you used, doesn't need to name any names, but any of these collaborative multisig services, obviously most of them need to know who you are as an individual. And obviously they'll be surfacing you with all of your balances so that they know that person A owns this much Bitcoin and it's distributed across all of these addresses. So if you're a privacy conscious individual, then that may be a trade-off that you're not willing to make.
Right, it's trade-offs all the way down. So we each have to evaluate our personal situation and decide if the privacy that you're going to give up working with a third-party service is worth it. You're also giving up a little bit of a control. But that's part of the point, is that if something happens and you lose a private key and you have to lean on the service provider, obviously they're going to determine whether or not you get access to that key at some point. So if you have an uncertain legal status or something like that, that could be an additional liability. But that's kind of an edge case. So I just say trade-offs all the way down.
We always love to talk about trade-offs. I talk about that all the time, and I'm sure you guys. It's just an educational thing, right? It's if that works for you and you're happy with that trade-off, then that can be a very beneficial service for you. Obviously, you're paying a monthly fee or whatnot, and those companies provide a very valuable service for a lot of people. So if you're willing to accept that trade-off and you're willing to give up a little bit of privacy, then that's totally for you, and that works for you. That's great. I would say, I personally, if you can do it on your own, and if you can have someone that's really close to you, family, friend, member, that you trust enough to hold one of your keys or even hold your descriptor file, things like that, I would definitely recommend going that route, but it's up to everyone to decide what is best for them. Obviously, the privacy trade-offs for me are not worth it, but some people are willing to accept that, right? I'm not. I don't. They could give up information about you to some entity that could potentially put you at risk. So just something to really think about before just jumping into the deep end in that sense. So yeah. Speaking of multisig versus single sig, can we talk about passphrases a little bit? Is that a different way of going about storing your seed or storing your Bitcoin? Is it a potential foot gun? Is one word good? Is six words good for a passphrase? What are your thoughts on passphrases in general versus multisig? Seed, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. Passphrases, I'll just a general framing for me is that a password turns your single sig wallet into functionally a 2 of 2 multisig. So if you don't have the key or you don't have the password, you don't have access to the funds. The peek behind the curtain as to how BIP32 functions is that the data from your passphrase actually transforms the private key that's represented by the seed phrase into a brand new private key that you can't access without both of those two pieces. The other thing I would point out is that in security, we have basically 3 mechanisms that we can leverage. We have things you have, things you are, and things you know. A seed phrase is typically something you have, and a passphrase is something you know. If you write down the passphrase, then it also becomes something you may still know, but it also becomes something you have. So it's interesting to think about the interplay between those. The thing that makes me nervous about passphrases, being a guy in his 40s, I'll dox myself a little bit, is that sometimes some things get harder to remember, and nobody ever plans having some sort of head injury where suddenly you can't remember a password that was very familiar to you at a previous time. So I'm leery of passwords sometimes because I know my own memory is subject to failure, and as much as I'd like to think I'm completely in control and can memorize a passphrase, I have to be humble and I steer away from passwords. I just say with great power comes great responsibility, and that's how I think about them.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of passphrases personally, but again, just like with multisig, I don't like to recommend them to everybody from day one. I like to see it as a bit more of a progression journey. So most of the people I speak to day to day when I'm interfacing with customers at Foundation are just about comfortable with securing 12 or 24 words, and that's more than enough for them. Obviously, that comes with trade-offs in terms of single points of failure. So if you did want to then take the next step to add an extra layer of security to your Bitcoin, then yeah, passphrases could be a good option. But again, we've talked for the last 20 minutes about trade-offs, and unfortunately it's not going to change right now because, like you just said, once you move your funds into a passphrase protected wallet, you now have 2 pieces of information that you need to be able to restore access to that Bitcoin. So, with the extra security that they provide, you also have that extra responsibility and things that you either need to remember or to back up as well.
Yeah, it's nice. I like passphrases as well. I definitely advocate for it, but not for everyone. It's just nice as a kind of a plausible deniability when, say someone's got a gun to your head and they want your seed words. So you give them their seed words. Maybe you have a small amount of funds in there, and they don't know that you have a passphrase, right? It's not like as soon as you give someone your seed words, they know exactly what your passphrase is, or even if you have one set, right? So it's kind of nice in that sense where it's just a little added layer of security. Maybe it doesn't need to be too long, so you can, if you bonk your head, and you could brute force it with a few words if that's something you're interested in. But maybe it gives you enough time, a couple hours, a couple days, to go to your other recovery site, send those funds over, and just give away a little bit of your funds, not the entire hoard that you have in your passphrase wallet. So it's kind of nice. Yeah.
One other thing I'd throw out is just from a user experience perspective, passphrases is something that we're all familiar with. Even somebody who uses the fiat banking system or has an email account, people are familiar with passwords, passphrases, and they generally understand that the longer, the more complex, the less predictable it is, the more secure it is. So you can definitely make a good argument from a user experience perspective. It's something that people are familiar with and they can manage.
Yeah, I think one of the main foot guns that we haven't mentioned is that when you create a passphrase protected wallet, all passphrases are valid. So if you make a single typo when setting up your passphrase protected wallet in the first place, let's say you're going to use ABC123. Obviously, don't do that. It's a terrible idea, but just as an example. And when you press the 3 key, what you thought was the 3 key, you press the 4 key, you then back up ABC123 and send all of your funds into what you think is that wallet, and then you come to recover in 5-10 years time, and you enter what you thought your passphrase was, when in reality it wasn't that. You're going to have a pretty big shock, and obviously you're not going to be in for a good time. So always exercise caution, take your time, and as always, if you are going to level up your Bitcoin security before you send any significant amount of funds in, make sure that you practice that recovery process.
Absolutely. Speaking of recovery processes and even just signing, do you want to talk about ephemeral seeds and stateless devices like yourself, where when you want to sign, you can import your seed when needed, but it's not technically on the device at all times? What's your thoughts on that?
Right, I would call this maybe a half step short of what we all kind of talk about as the ideal of multi-vendor multisig. So potentially, if you're using a device that does not persistently store keys to some degree that you use with it, that opens up the capability of using one device to manage either multiple cosigners in a multisig wallet or all of the cosigners in a multisig wallet. And the advantage of that is that there's no longer this issue of having to learn 2 or 3 different UIs and maintain multiple updates and different signing processes. The trade-off with that is that if there is some sort of technical issue with that device, you're exposed via all your keys. Why I call it a good enough solution and maybe a half step below multi-vendor multisig is that if one of your keys is lost or exposed, you still are getting the benefits of multisig even though you're managing it with one device. So for some people, that's an advantage that makes sense and something that we feel like is a strong benefit of using a stateless approach with SeedSigner, or I don't want to steal QnA's thunder. Foundation has an announcement in that vein, and that's a feature that to some extent has been available on Cold Card as well as the Q.
Yep.
I can let you talk more about that.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and obviously that's a great explanation there. And if you want to have your seed stored on your device and you're willing to accept that trade-off as well with secure elements, that is another option as well, where you don't have to maybe perhaps expose your seed every time that you want to sign a transaction. So if everyone has a different option, or whatever they prefer or preferences, there's multiple options for that. Stateless can also be a great way to sign and keep your seed very secure. Did you want to talk a little bit about Foundation as well?
Yeah. Just quickly add that it's been a long-awaited feature from many of our customers. Is that since SeedSigner has grown significantly in popularity, and the nature of the way that SeedSigner operates with the stateless way that it is your seed is only stored ephemerally. But we're now adding that support as of next week, pending some QA tests. That if you want to use the device, you can actually use it in a hybrid mode. So you could use it fully in kind of what I call SeedSigner mode, where it never stores a seed ever, and you just temporarily load that. Also, but you can also have a master seed saved to the device in a traditional way that you would with a secure element type device like a Cold Card or a Passport. You can also have temporary seeds loaded as well, so you can kind of choose your own journey or choose a hybrid approach as well. So very excited about that.
And what I'd also point out, the advantage is it significantly lowers the bar for someone to get into a multisig. So previously, with hardware wallet devices that have that 1-to-1 ratio between the key and the device, you no longer have to purchase 3, 4, 5 devices just to start experimenting with multisig and seeing if it's something that you feel comfortable with. So the financial limit of having to purchase multiple separate devices, I think that's such a great advantage of that feature as it's implemented in different devices.
Sure. I like the idea of choose your own journey, right? We're up on stage giving you advice, opinions of ours, but obviously this is a personal decision that everyone needs to make, whether that's single sig, multi-sig, passphrase, 3 of 5, 2 of 3, whatever you want, right? It's kind of up to you to decide and to learn on your own or with collaborative multi-sig on what works best for you. So a lot of people will give their opinions on what they think is best, but that might not be the best for you. So I really highly encourage everyone to kind of read as much as possible, learn, continue learning. Everyone has lots to learn, even us. There's always another rabbit hole that goes a little deeper. So highly recommend keep learning and keep educating yourself and find what works best for you and your setup. And I know, QnA, you wanted to talk about closing remarks regarding Samurai.
Yeah, just wanted to leverage the short time that I have on stage to mention or raise awareness for anybody that's remotely interested in using Bitcoin self-custodially or the optional privacy tools that we used to have. There is a war being waged against Bitcoin privacy right now. With the Samurai developer teams are currently awaiting a trial based in the US. And if you are interested in kind of supporting them, I would urge everybody to check out p2prights.org. And please do support in any way that you can to fight that, because the ramifications or potential ramifications of the results of this case affect everybody in this room, whether you know about it or not.
Absolutely. SeedSigner, do you want to close remarks and then I'll finish up?
I don't have anything else. I think that's a great way to end. It really is something that's important to everybody who calls themselves a Bitcoiner. So,
absolutely. Awesome. Thanks guys for coming. Really appreciate it. And till next time. Take care.